Welcome back to another episode of Up in the Air.
This week, our team member Ryan Brunton has the week off as he is attending the National Weather Association Conference in Salt Lake City.
Hopefully he brings back some awesome stories from the weather world.
This week, Matt and Christy will be joining us for the Risk Report detailing the current drought in California.
And a graduate from the PSU Meteorology Department will also be discussing how the weather impacts the Nittany Lion football team.
But now, we have your latest news and information from the weather enterprise and climate community. Here's Update in the Air. After many years of puzzlement, scientists have finally solved the mystery of Australia's only active volcanic area. The area in question is a 500-kilometer-long region stretching from Melbourne down to the town of Mount Gambier in the south of Australia. Just outside of Mount Gambier lies a dormant volcano that has not erupted for 5,000 years. Scientists were long unsure of how this volcanic area came to existence. However, recent analysis of the area has determined that local variations in the continent's thickness have resulted in this volcanic region. This is opposed to more organized areas of volcanic activity such as the Pacific Rim of Fire that occur on the edges of tectonic plates. According to the scientists, the differences in thickness propel currents from the underlying mantle, which bring heat from deep within the Earth towards the surface. In the process of these discoveries, it was also found that the continent of Australia is drifting northward at a rate of 7 centimeters per year towards New Guinea and Indonesia. This drift is also in part responsible for the isolated volcanic area. Dr. Rodri Davies, the scientist who was able to model the dynamics of the region, hopes to perform similar analyses of around 50 other similarly isolated volcanic areas around the world.
According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Climate Prediction Center, the El Niño currently being tracked in the eastern Pacific Ocean has yet to fully emerge. In the monthly update, the CPC said that there is still a 2/3 chance that a weak El Niño event will emerge between October and December, lasting until spring 2015. There is a strong connection between El Niño and quiet Atlantic hurricane seasons. With 2014 being a quiet season, experts are pointing towards El Niño to explain the absence of hurricanes. The slight warming the El Niño has produced helped bump 2014 summer as the warmest summer on record. If the El Niño continues, it surely will push 2014 to be the warmest on record. El Niño is also known to increase precipitation in Southern California. This precipitation is greatly needed in this area as they are in the midst of a 3-year drought. However, with this El Niño expected to be weak, the picture for California's winter is still unclear.
Following 15 years of research, scientists at the University of Manchester are hopeful that their findings could lead to a major breakthrough in detoxifying dangerous pollutants. This excitement is in the wake of a comprehensive study that investigated how some natural organisms are capable of lowering levels of toxicity and shortening the lifespan of certain pollutants. According to the research, these organisms contain the vitamin B12 and use it in ways that scientists had previously not imagined. Now that the researchers have a greater understanding of how these natural organisms are able to detoxify the pollutants, the hope is that the process can now be replicated for human use. According to members of the team, the main difficulty in the study was in being able to grow enough of the organisms to properly observe their behavior in the lab. Once grown, however, X-rays were used to analyze exactly how the halogens in the organisms were removed. With levels of pollutants in the environment on the increase, scientists are confident that these new findings will be crucial in the future of combating harmful pollutants.
In a time where every glacier is melting, retreating, or vanishing, the glaciers in the mountains of the Karakoram region of Asia are not. A postdoctoral researcher at Princeton University was curious of this controversy as these glaciers haven't changed, unlike others around the world. Observations in the Karakoram region reveal that snowfall is increasing and glaciers are stable. Combining observations, satellite data, and climate models, the researchers tracked the changes in 3 regions of the Himalayas between 1861 and 2100. Using a resolution of 19 square miles, they were able to match the observed temperature and precipitation cycles seen in Karakoram. Lower resolution models, including the ones used by the IPCC, smooth out the variations in elevation and overestimate the amount of warmth in this region. Understanding the snowfall in the Himalayas is important for testing out regional variations in climate change.
Over the next few weeks, NASA will carry out the 6th consecutive year of Operation Ice Bridge, in which research flights over Antarctica are used to study changes in the continent's ice sheets, glaciers, and sea ice. Researchers will fly out of Chile on DC-8 aircraft and will return to western Antarctica for the first time in 2 years. The NASA researchers are curious to see just how much the area has changed during this time period. The operation will use numerous instruments for analysis, including a laser altimeter, many forms of radar, as well as cameras and a gravimeter, which measures small changes in gravity. The mission will also focus on Antarctic sea ice, which has recently reached record high coverage as opposed to declining sea ice in the Arctic. According to scientists at NASA, this is due to a variety of factors, most notably changing wind patterns. The scientists are interested in what appears to be a very strong regional variation in how sea ice is changing. For example, ice cover in the Bellingshausen Sea has been decreasing while nearby in the Ross Sea, the ice cover is growing. Operation Icebridge's Arctic campaign is planned to run through late November.
A hot spot near the Four Corners intersection of Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah is responsible for producing the largest concentration of the greenhouse gas methane in the United States. Using observations from the European Space Agency's Scanning Imaging Absorption Spectrometer for Atmospheric Cartography instrument, concluded that every year throughout the measuring period, this hotspot persisted, releasing 0.59 million metric tons of methane into the atmosphere each year. This is more than triple the ground-based estimate. This measurement was validated by a ground station in the Total Carbon Column Observing Network operated by the Department of Energy's Los Alamos National Laboratory. This measurement comes before the widespread use of hydraulic fracturing, but the increase has attributed to leaks in natural gas production and processing in New Mexico's San Juan Basin. Natural gas is 95 to 98% methane, but with the gas being colorless and odorless, it is hard to detect for leaks without scientific instruments. Under the Climate Action Plan, strategies for improving the measurement and monitoring of methane emissions will hopefully improve the industry as a whole. That's it for this week's Update in the Air. We'll be back in a moment with more.
While many popular sports such as baseball and football only take place during certain seasons, some runners gear up throughout the entire year, even as the seasons change. To find out how runners transition into the cold season and how the chilly weather affects training, I visited a Penn State club cross-country practice which takes place at Rec Hall on the University Park campus.
I've been running since I was in 7th grade, so it's 7 years now, something like that. And I typically run throughout the year, so, all 4 seasons.
Though many communities offer facilities where runners can train indoors, such as the Rec Hall's indoor track, many runners prefer to run outside no matter what the weather.
I like to run in the warmer months more because it's a little easier on, clothing-wise, and it's just easier to get out the door. But I also enjoy the cool weather for racing a little more because it keeps your body a little cooler. You can perform a little better that way, I think. In the winter, I'll typically do a little bit more like distance running, a little bit slower stuff because, the ground's a little more, there's some ice and stuff sometimes, so you got to be careful of that. And also, it's not quite as warm out, so your muscles aren't quite as loose, so you're going to go a little bit slower, a little bit longer maybe. You can also have a little bit more gear on. You can have some pants, some, long sleeves and a hat or something, so it'll slow you down a little bit.
And although this year's national championship meet boasted beautiful weather in Hershey, PA, that's not always the case.
One time in high school, I was running a track meet, and I think it was in March, and there was, one of those freak snowstorms that happens. So I ended up running, on the track in like a complete blizzard. We could barely see the lanes. It was pretty terrible.
For Up in the Air, I'm Dylan Dernick.
Welcome back to Up in the Air.
Joining us now is Christy Stewart and Matt Flornoy with this week's Risk Report.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Hunter and Meredith. We're excited to be here.
So what's going on out in California?
With the ongoing severe drought in California right now, and no indications of an end in sight, many industries are suffering from the water shortage. As of right now, this drought is considered the most severe on record, spanning throughout much of the state.
What types of industries are being affected?
Brewing companies in California are struggling with the drought big time. According to the general manager for the Anheuser-Busch Brewery in Los Angeles, the amount of water in a standard can of beer is 92%, so water is a necessity. Not only is it a problem for the beer itself, but these companies also need water to clean their tanks that are used for brewing the beer. Lager beer producers are not the only ones being affected, but also California's fast-growing craft brewing industry is struggling to make beer.
What could this do to prices?
It be expected that prices for beer in California will rise due to the drought. Breweries are paying more money for wells to be created nearby in order to gain more access to water. Additionally, if the drought continues, it can be anticipated that more breweries will leave the area for new markets that have access to more water. This will raise the price of beer even more since transportation costs for bringing the beer to California will be tacked on.
Are any other industries experiencing increased impacts from the drought?
Some other industries experiencing impacts from this drought include the dairy and pumpkin industries. California is the largest milk producer in the United States and has lost about 2% of its dairy industry due to the drought causing an increase in livestock deaths. California also has the second largest pumpkin industry in the country. To compensate for the drought and meet the demands, many farmers have had to pump more water out of the ground than usual, causing the cost of production to go up and consumers having to pay more for this crop.
And thanks for the insight into the California drought.
Thanks for having us.
Next week, Faith and Amanda will be here with your risk report.
We are joined by Heather Waldman, who will be discussing the impacts of weather on the Penn State football team.
Each week, thousands of fans pack the bleachers of Beaver Stadium to watch the Nittany Lions square off on the gridiron. But it's not just the players that take the occasional hit. Every week, dozens of grounds crew members patch, mow, and paint the field to have it in pristine condition for the opening kickoff. And Mother Nature is always a part of their planning.
The weather is a big factor in what we do day in and day out, not only for events. It kind of drives what we do and what we can do, whether we can spray a fertilizer or spray a chemical, or whether we can paint. You can't paint in the rain, or whether we can go mow. So the weather determines, every day, and you start that process by looking at the weather days in advance. So we'll go back to the Kent State game. We knew that we were going to get some sort of rain activity, so we didn't water the field at all that week, so that the timing in that it was going to rain during the game, that the field could take the additional moisture.
Of course, when bad weather makes a mess of the playing field, it can also alter the entire atmosphere of the game.
I think it affects the game to a certain degree. I mean, the coaches, they game plan, and they're obviously looking at the weather, and they're tailoring their game plan for it. But I think the fans, at the Kent State game, the fans there weren't a lot here, but they were loud and into it. And I think it brings a unique atmosphere. I don't know how to quantify it. I think it's just different.
Planning around the weather to work in an empty Beaver Stadium is hard enough, but what about during the peak of game day action? Bad weather not only makes the field more difficult to work with, it can also pose a threat to fans and workers alike. That's why in 2012, Penn State brought on an on-site meteorologist to join the game day staff.
The main duty is to provide notice real time if there's going to be lightning, heavy rain, or strong winds affecting the stadium. We do primarily function just during game days. There is some advanced communication prior to the game, especially if bad weather is anticipated on the game day, communicate the forecast and the possibilities. And we also speak to the grounds crew as they prepare the field during the week before the game.
As they say, regardless of the weather, the show must go on, and Mother Nature will always be a part of the game day crew's planning. For Up in the Air, I'm Heather Waldman.
Thanks, Heather.
And that's all we have for today's show. Ryan will be back with us next week for another episode of Up in the Air. I'm Hunter Williams.
And I'm Meredith Fish. Join us next week, Up in the Air.